In 47 measured seconds, Denzel Washington set a sealed envelope onto the committee desk. Not slammed, not tossed, but set down with the sort of precision that could stop a room full of power players mid-breath. Inside its manila folds lay a DNA report, a child's name, and a bloodline tracing directly to the Oval Office. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Cameras dialed in their shots. Across the table, Donald Trump's smirk faltered live before an audience of 38 million. The kind of truth inside that envelope could fracture reputations in an instant, enough to drain the color from even the staunchest man alive. The red tally light over the broadcast cameras strobed once and locked, marking the moment. Inside the Oversight Committee chamber, silence gathered. The heavy kind only live television can summon forth, where every cough and shuffle and breath seems magnified for the nation. Marble walls seemed to hold their breath. Camera rigs slid smoothly along their rails like silent predators, scanning for reactions. Staffers on one side riffled furiously through thick, color-coded briefing binders. Opposite them, reporters hammered their phones with frantic thumbs, their screens lighting up like wildfire. And then he entered. Denzel Washington didn't walk in like a lawmaker. He walked in like a man who had nothing left to prove and something monumental to deliver. His presence was calm, yet whetted to a fine edge. No theatrics, no smiles. His gaze never wandered. He allowed the weight of the room to take notice of him without giving that weight any acknowledgement. Each strike of his polished shoes against the marble floors was like a second ticking toward detonation. In his left hand, a sealed manila envelope, corners worn from handling. In his right, a black leather notebook with a single word carved into its cover. Lucia. Across the chamber, Donald Trump sat poised. Secret Service flanked him. Lawyers crowded in close at his right. A carefully tended media team hovered behind him like stylists before a primetime debut. His navy suit and bright red tie caught the light like a warning signal. He radiated comfort, too much comfort, as if today were nothing more than another segment in some long-running show, and Denzel merely another supporting act. The chairman's voice broke through, announcing the formal purpose of the session, an inquiry into the alleged misuse of humanitarian funds earmarked for migrant families at the southern border. It was official. It was procedural. It was theater. Everyone already knew the real question. Where had the missing $6.7 million gone, and whose hand had signed it away? Denzel said nothing. Instead, he tapped the envelope twice against the table, lightly, deliberately, and placed it beside the microphone without so much as a glance. Every figure, every date, every word inside was already committed to memory. This was more than paper. It was a burden he had carried for 3 unrelenting weeks, one that would cease, to be his alone within 19 minutes. Across the table, Trump leaned toward an aide, murmured something, and received a quiet, smug chuckle in return. Denzel heard it, but didn't react. He opened his notebook, turning past prepared questions until he found a grainy black-and-white photograph, its edges dog-eared, its date and time stamped in the corner. He slid it beneath his notes so that half of it remained visible, the other half swallowed by shadow. One camera caught Denzel's steady expression. Another zoomed in on Trump's restless hands. A young congressman beside Denzel murmured a question under his breath. Denzel's only reply was a slow, measured exhale, the kind a judge releases before delivering a verdict. The chairman gave a curt nod. "Mr. Washington, your time begins now." He adjusted the microphone with deliberate care, his gaze fixed on the envelope as though it might move on its own. Not yet. Truth was not something to be hurled like a weapon. It wasn't performance. It was precision. It was surgery. Leaning forward, he offered a calm acknowledgement to the chairman. His voice carried no urgency, no heat, just a steady cadence that drew the entire room closer. Then, without looking away, he asked the second question. What could be inside this envelope that might make a sitting president wish these cameras had never been turned on? Before the first question could resolve itself, Trump pounced. He leaned forward, adjusted his microphone, and fired back a practiced barb with the ease of a man who'd rehearsed it all morning. People like him don't understand family values. The line hit like a spark in dry timber. On the Republican side, laughter flared. spreading from aides to congressmen, picking up speed until one of them even clapped. For a moment, the energy in the chamber tipped toward Trump. His smirk spread as if he'd scored a definitive point. But Denzel didn't budge. No blink, no shift, no acknowledgement. He let the insult drift through the marble chamber, caroming off the walls until it thinned and fell like ash. His fingers rested on the envelope, tapping once before silence reclaimed the room. Beneath the desk, hidden from the cameras, his thumb traced the flap of the envelope. The truth was a breath away from release, but not yet. The hearing room faded from his awareness. The laughter, the lights, the stage theater, all gone. Instead, his mind dropped him back 3 weeks to a quiet church basement in San Antonio. The air hung heavy with incense, a single rosary hanging from the wall. Across the table sat Maria Alvarez, eyes rimmed red, her hands trembling as she pushed an envelope toward him. She had kept it hidden for years, her voice breaking under the weight of confession. Fear had silenced her. He was powerful. She was invisible. Denzel hadn't interrupted. He'd simply reached out and taken the envelope in both hands, treating it like something sacred. Inside, he found a notarized DNA test. The result, a paternity match, 99.98%. At the top, a name, Lucia Maria Alvarez, age 11. Listed father, Donald J. Trump. For all of a minute, Denzel had said nothing. Then, placing his hand gently over Maria's, he made a quiet promise. They would see her now. The memory dissolved, and he was back under the committee lights. His left hand rested once again on the manila envelope. His finger eased beneath its seal until the adhesive gave way with a faint crack, not torn, but open just enough. Beneath his fingertips, he felt the crisp edge of the DNA report, the corner of a photograph, and a folded letter written in purple ink. Twice. His thumb scrolled along the paper's edge. A single pulse thudded against his ribs before he looked up. Across the room, Trump leaned back with that same self-satisfied posture, sipping water as if none of this mattered. Somewhere in the press gallery, a Fox News commentator jotted down a ready-made headline. Washington wavers. Denzel closed the envelope again. Not yet. 7 minutes remained. 38 million people were watching, and now the weight in the room seemed to tilt toward him. The longer he stayed silent, the more Trump's posture withered. Each calm breath made the president's bluster seem louder, emptier. His eyes shifted briefly to the chairman, then back to the man whose name sat bold and undeniable atop a paternity test. A small smile touched Denzel's lips, not wide, just enough to say, "I know what you don't." He squared the papers before him, cleared his throat, and pivoted to his next question. Not about Lucia, not yet. Instead, about the missing $67 million that had never reached migrant shelters. Justice didn't always crash through the door. Sometimes it arrived quietly, waiting for the perfect silence. And now, with minutes ticking, Denzel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He leaned toward the microphone, fingertips grazing the envelope's edge like it was both sacred and dangerous. The chamber responded in kind, slowing, stilling. Camera operators eased their movements. A quiet ripple of recognition passed through the room. Something irreversible was approaching. His voice came low, unwavering. He said he hadn't planned on this today, but the president had brought up family. That word hung in the air like smoke, heavy as fog over the chamber. A word Trump had used minutes before now circled back, honed and sharpened. Denzel dropped the envelope in the middle of the witness table, centering it faultlessly under the light. The edges shone yellow against the wood. It looked ordinary, yet everyone could feel it ticking. Trump cocked his head, narrowing his eyes. His smirk faltered almost imperceptibly. One aide bent and close to whisper, but Trump waved him off, crossing his arms across his chest. Denzel opened the black notebook, flicking past policy scrawls until he found a single sheet of white paper. He didn't read it, just held it light between his fingers, letting silence wrap around the room until the tension sat heavy in every chest. Then, with quiet certainty, he spoke. Lucia Alvarez, 11 years old. No father until this DNA test. The room froze for a long beat. Nothing moved. Then came a single gasp. Paper shifted. A pen clattered to the floor. Someone coughed, trying to puncture the tension, but failing. Trump jerked forward, grasping for the table. His voice rose sharply, calling it ridiculous, irrelevant, fake. But the hold he had on the room was gone. He glanced to the chairman for rescue. Denzel's response was cool and measured. 2 independent labs had done the test, filed under seal for protection of the child. Now it was unsealed. His fingertip tapped the envelope once. The sound echoed. The chairman shifted uncomfortably, urging him to stay on topic. Denzel didn't break his stare. "I am on topic," he said. "The topic is truth, and this child deserves it." From his folder, he pulled a second document, neither brandished nor displayed, just held, waiting for the moment it would speak for itself. He laid the second document down beside the envelope with surgical precision. His breathing didn't change, his tone didn't shift. Across the table, Trump was on his feet now, finger jabbing the air. His voice cut through the chamber, calling the moment a political hit job. "Disgusting," he said. Denzel's reply cleaved through the noise. "She's not politics. She's a girl, a citizen, a name you refuse to say." This time the gasps were loud enough to echo. A congresswoman covered her mouth. Reporters scrambled over one another for position. Even the live captions on C-SPAN stalled mid-sentence, as if the system itself didn't know how to proceed. From his folder, Denzel removed a photograph. He didn't lift it for effect, didn't angle it toward the cameras. Instead, he set it gently, face down atop the envelope. He let his eyes rest on it before returning his gaze to the room. When he looked up, there was no request for permission, no appeal for sympathy, only the steady weight of a reckoning long overdue. His next words landed in a quiet that seemed to hollow the air. What will America do when it sees what he left behind? The photograph remained face down, still as a loaded secret, waiting for its moment. But Denzel didn't reach for it. Not yet. Instead, he slid a hand to the envelope, easing free a single crisp sheet of white paper stamped with the federal court seal. He held it at shoulder height, perfectly still, letting the cameras capture the gleam of its embossed verdict. The room inhaled and kept it. His voice was level, unshaken. This was a verified DNA test, witnessed, notarized, confirmed by 2 independent laboratories. Then he read the results aloud. Subject A, Donald John Trump. Subject B, Lucia Maria Alvarez. Paternity probability, 99-98%. Gas fractured the chamber. The air cooled as if the marble itself absorbed the shock. Pins froze mid-note. Aides stopped mid-step. Reporters lunged for their phones. In the press pit, someone from Fox News muttered a curse, while CNN's ticker stuttered into life. Split screens blinked on. Twitter ignited. Somewhere across the nation, 38 million people leaned closer to their screens at the same moment. Denzel didn't blink. This child is not a rumor, not a footnote, not a headline. She is a living, breathing citizen with rights. On screen, Trump's jaw locked so tight the veins in his neck strained. One fist pressed into the desk. His aides swarmed, a young staffer rushing in with whispered urgency. But Trump waved him off with a sharp flick. He hadn't spoken again. Denzel placed the DNA report beside the still face-own photo, adjusted the microphone. His voice carried no flame, only steel. "This isn't theater, it's accountability. This is about a man in power who abandoned a child while preaching values to this country. He let the statement hang unhurried. He can say it's fake. He can call it a stunt. But science doesn't vote red or blue. It only reveals." The audience remained motionless. One reporter slid her glasses off, dazed. Another mouthed a silent, "Oh my God," into their camera feed. Split screens filled televisions nationwide. On one side, Denzel Washington, steady as stone. On the other, Donald Trump, jaw clamped, a sheen of sweat blooming at his temple. The scene's power came not from noise, but from its stillness. The chairman attempted to intervene. "Congressman Washington, perhaps we should redirect." Denzel cut in crisp as a blade. "I am on topic." His tone didn't rise, but it landed heavy. "The topic is the misuse of humanitarian funds. And tell me, what's more inhumane than abandoning your own child in a detention camp?" The silence that followed was heavier than any uproar. His hand tapped the face-own photo, a promise waiting. Then came the blow. Donald Trump diverted $6. $7 million mint for migrant aid, while one of those migrants, his own daughter, sat in a concrete cell for 36 hours. No food, no contact, no father. His voice dropped lower. That's not just corruption, that's blood money. The air seemed to vibrate. A low, almost inaudible hum passed through the chamber. Not sound, but human reaction. Then Trump leaned forward, voice sharp. "You don't have the right." Denzel lifted a hand, palm open. "I do." The word was quiet, final, because she's not just a case file. She's not a number. She's a little girl who looks just like you and who's waited 11 years to be seen. He turned then, not to the chairman, not to the press, but directly to the camera lens. "America, and I haven't even shown you the worst of it." His hand moved toward the photograph, but didn't flip it. He wasn't ready because this moment wasn't about papers. It was about a voice. Without a word, Denzel reached beneath his stack of files and withdrew a small matte black remote. One press of his thumb, and the chamber screens flickered before dropping to black. Lights dimmed for a breath. Then the video began. No music, no effects, just raw testimony. A woman sat in a folding chair wearing a faded blue blouse. A silver cross rested against her collarbone. White text appeared on screen. Maria Alvarez. She met the camera head-on, eyes swollen but dry. Her voice caught once but never broke. "I met him when I was 19. I worked at Mar-a-Lago cleaning rooms, folding towels, serving cocktails I couldn't pronounce." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward. "I never asked for anything," she continued. "I was undocumented. I was invisible, and that's how he wanted it." Her hands folded tightly in her lap. On the witness table, Denzel didn't blink, didn't shift, watching her words fill the room. "I told him I was pregnant," she said. He looked at me and said, "You'll disappear. Understand?" She paused, drew a breath, and locked her gaze with the lens. "I did disappear. I ran. I changed my name. I raised Lucia with 2 jobs and one prayer that she'd never feel unwanted." In the chamber, a few members of the press wiped their eyes discreetly. One of the conservative representatives shook his head, not in anger, but in disbelief. "I never filed a lawsuit, never went to the press. I was afraid of what he could do, of what he could take, of what he'd call me." Her knuckles whitened, her lips trembling, but her expression hardened. "But my daughter won't disappear. Not anymore." The screen cut to black without ceremony. No fade out, no sound, just the silence that followed. At the front of the chamber, Denzel Washington remained motionless, both hands pressed flat to the table. Trump said nothing. His knuckles had blanched white against the desk. His legal team looked stunned, not at the drama of it, but at the authenticity bleeding through with every word. Finally, Denzel turned, not toward the chairman, not toward the press, but toward the Americans seated behind him. His voice barely lifted. "You heard her, you saw her, and you know she didn't lie." Then slowly he turned to face Trump. "You told Maria to vanish," Denzel thought. "But this time you can't erase her child." The seconds ticked, one, then another. He lifted the remote, pressed the button. The screens lit again, but this time the tone shifted. A child's drawing appeared, purple crayon strokes forming a sun, a heart, 2 stick figures holding hands. Then came the voice, young, soft, braver than it should have to be. "Hi, my name is Lucia. I think my daddy is on TV." The chamber cracked silently in ways no sound could measure. "I don't know if he remembers me, but I hope he does." The screen was black, but the voice filled the air. No music, no production, just the unvarnished sound of a little girl speaking into a borrowed phone. "Dear Dad," she began, slow and careful, unaware that millions were listening. "I hope one day you see me. I look like you. That's what Mama says." No one moved, no coughs, no shuffling of papers. Denzel stood with his hands clasped, head slightly bowed, not in weakness, but in reverence, the kind of stillness that lets truth speak for itself. "I'm in 5th grade. My favorite color is purple. I like drawing dogs and people with funny hair. I drew you once, but I messed up the tie. A muffled laugh rose from the gallery, cut short into a cough. The chairman adjusted his glasses but didn't dare speak. I don't know why you don't talk to Mama, Lucia continued slower now, but I hope you're okay. I'm okay too, except when I'm not. Trump shifted. His jaw tightened. His fingers tapped the desk, once then went still. He leaned toward the microphone. This is a setup. This is disgusting. Mr. President, the chairman snapped, sharp and sudden, you are not recognized at this time. Lucia's voice played on untouched. I had a dream last week. You gave me a cupcake with red, white, and blue sprinkles. Mama said, maybe that means you still think about me. The audio glitched for a heartbeat, then steadied. I just want to know what your voice sounds like. Love, Lucia. Then nothing. Not empty silence, but full of heartbreak, full of neglect, full of what it means to be forgotten. Denzel lifted his head. His expression was unreadable. When he spoke, the control in his voice cut sharper than any shout. This little girl has waited 11 years. Can the president spare 11 seconds to look at her face? His hand went to the photograph, the one that had waited face down since the beginning. This time there was no pause. He turned it over and placed it in the center of the table for the cameras, for Congress, for the country. The image was sharp, undeniable. Trump at a charity gala cradling a baby girl, a silver backdrop behind him, a name tag still clipped to his lapel, and Lucia's eyes, wide and unblinking, stared straight into the lens from the past into the present. Gasps ripped through the chamber. Reporters stood. Some covered their mouths, others simply froze. Trump didn't move, didn't speak. His jaw flexed, but no sound followed. Without raising his voice, without pointing a finger, Denzel Washington lowered his gaze to the photograph resting before him. And in that still moment, the country saw what had been left behind. But this wasn't the end. There was more. Something buried deeper. Something even the White House hadn't anticipated. The photograph sat small and silent on the table, yet it pulsed like a live detonator. Denzel let it breathe, let its weight settle into the walls and into the lungs of everyone watching. He let it land, not like an argument, but like a verdict. Then with slow, deliberate movement, he turned the image toward the cameras. The grain was visible, but the truth inside it was not blurred. A younger Donald Trump, black tuxedo, a baby in white, cradled in one arm, the hand beneath her head stiff and staged behind them. The Mar-a-Lago backdrop glimmered in gold. Donor banners fluttered faintly in the corners of the frame. Gasps swept the chamber again. Reporters leaned forward. In broadcast control rooms across the country, analysts scrambled to verify. But Denzel didn't wait for them to catch up. This photograph, he said, voice cutting clear through the air, was taken on February 11th, 2012, during the Hearts for Hope charity gala at Mar-a-Lago. From his folder, he produced a color-printed, court-stamped document. This is the event schedule from that night. He raised it briefly, then set it down. From the same folder, he lifted a second sheet, and this is the president's confirmed calendar entry, placing him at that gala between 6:30 p.m. and 9:45 p.m. Across the table, Trump's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A twitch, a tell. His attorney shot to his feet, adjusting his tie as he rushed the microphone. Objection. This photo has no legal foundation, no verified source. This is reckless slander broadcast live. Denzel was already reaching for the next piece of evidence before the man could finish. His tone wasn't raised, it was sharpened, overruled. The chairman hadn't spoken. The gallery murmured. Denzel continued, surgical and steady. From his folder, he withdrew a small black flash drive and held it aloft. Then he slid it across the table like a weapon being handed over. This contains the original metadata from the photographer's camera, time-stamped, geotagged, and verified by 3 independent forensic analysts from the House Oversight Tech Division. Feel free to review it. It will confirm what the rest of us can already see. Trump's lawyer tried to speak again, but Denzel's next words cut him short. If the president wants to deny the photo, he's welcome to do so under oath. Until then, the evidence speaks louder than his counsel. Trump's jaw tightened, his hand gripped the microphone. Still, he said nothing. Behind Denzel, the chamber screen shifted and the photograph appeared. 10 ft tall, every detail visible, unavoidable. Trump was not a leader in that image, not a father, just caught. The room was no longer quiet, it was held. The air was thick enough to feel, every unspoken word suspended between walls of marble. Denzel leaned forward, his voice cutting through it with measured weight. This isn't just a picture, it's proof. Proof that this little girl didn't imagine him. Proof that Maria didn't lie. Proof that the man who lectures this nation about family values once held his own daughter in his arms and then chose to act as if she never existed. The photograph glowed under the lights, its image reflected in water glasses, polished desks, and camera lenses. Across the country, journalists blasted it across feeds. Anchors tore up live scripts, and America leaned in. But Denzel wasn't finished. His tone softened, yet grew heavier. I didn't come alone today. He turned toward a side door at the edge of the chamber. Someone has been waiting 12 years to speak. A quiet click and the door opened. Every head turned, Denzel remained silent as the figure stepped inside. A modest brown blazer, neatly combed white hair, sensible shoes. She walked with no hint of nerves, only the quiet dignity of someone who'd negotiated colder, harder halls than this one. Clara S. Stein, retired nurse, former delivery staff at Palm Beach Women's Clinic. Today, the witness no one had anticipated. She reached the microphone. Her voice aged but steady, slipping into the room like the first crack in a dam. My name is Clara Esteban. I was a registered nurse for 32 years. In 2012, I assisted in the delivery of a baby girl at Palmetto Care Clinic. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Trump. He didn't blink, but his shoulders squared and his chin tightened. Clara continued. Normally, I wouldn't be allowed to speak about this, but Maria signed a release. She wants the truth told. Her hands trembled slightly, but her words did not. The mother arrived alone. She spoke little English. She was frightened. She kept asking if the father would come. Clara paused, exhaled, then dropped the stone. About 30 minutes after the baby was born, a man entered through the back hallway. No security, no announcement, just a heavy coat, a baseball cap, and a very recognizable face. The room froze. Trump stayed motionless, but his jaw tightened again. I was at the nursery station, Clara said. I saw him. He didn't say much. He held the child for maybe 20 seconds. Then he placed a gift bag beside the crib. She reached into her purse with slow, deliberate care. I kept this. The room inhaled as one. Clara lifted a worn photograph, its corners yellowed, edges curled with time. Inside the frame, a folded note in delicate gold script from my little Lucia D. She paused, her voice quiet but cutting. I remember asking him, should I write the father's name on the certificate? She looked down, then back up. He shook his head, told me, don't bother. This never happened. Her swallow was audible in the silence. I didn't speak that night. I didn't speak for 12 years because I was afraid of what he could do, of what people would say. Then Clara turned not to the press, not to Trump, but to Denzel. But today, I'm not afraid anymore. Facing the committee, her final words fell like a gavel. I stayed silent until today because truth has a birth date too. Whispers erupted across the chamber. Reporters scrambled. Glasses toppled. Camera lights flared white-hot. Trump sat frozen, the color draining from his face. His hands flexed against the desk, but no words came, not even denial. Denzel stepped beside Clara, silent, steady. He placed her photograph next to the DNA test. 3 objects, 3 lives, 1 truth. His voice was calm, cold. The evidence has spoken. The witness has spoken. Now so will I. The energy in the room shifted, heavier, thicker, as though the air itself resisted. From beneath his binder, he drew something small. Not a document, not a photograph. A cloth bracelet, child-sized, faded pink, frayed at the seams, stained with dirt and dried blood. Across its center, still visible through the grime, the words Trump 2020, America First. A hush swept the room. Denzel held it up by 2 fingers. His hand trembled, not with fear, but with fury held still. This was Lucius, he said, voice steady but raw. It was found on her wrist when she was detained last year in McAllen, Texas. Her ID tag had snapped. This was her replacement. He glanced down at it, then back up, his voice sharpening. She had a fever, a cut on her arm from a fence post. She asked for help. They gave her bottled water, left her on a cot for 2 days. No insulin, no medical file, just this. His fingers curled around the bracelet. By the second night, she'd bled through it. Gasps came again, this time deeper, heavier, edged with anger. A woman in the back wiped her eyes. A reporter lowered his pen, staring. She bled. Denzel repeated, "Slower now," and they wrapped her in a campaign slogan. He placed the bracelet beside the DNA test, beside the photograph, beside Clara's note. A trail was forming, each piece a step closer to a truth. Too ugly to spin. Trump shifted in his chair, leaning back, arms folded. But the cameras caught the whiteness in his knuckles, the tautness in his jaw. "This isn't about left or right," Denzel said. "It isn't about Democrat or Republican." His voice dropped to a low, controlled edge. "It's about a child, a girl who bled in silence while her father told this country he cared about American families." One beat, two, no one spoke. Then he asked the question no one could answer. So what does a president do when his own daughter becomes the headline? The bracelet lay on the table like it was still bleeding. Trump didn't look at it directly, but the weight of it showed in his grip on the microphone, his breathing quickening, his eyes darted. Lawyer Denzel cameras before he finally snapped. "This is a disgrace." His voice ricocheted off marble. "A disgrace to this committee, to this institution, to the presidency itself." He shoved back his chair, standing so sharply the mic wobbled. "She's lying. This is a witch hunt, a complete fabrication by a woman who doesn't even understand what it means to be an American." The room jolted, a ripple of gas like wind snapping dry leaves. But Denzel didn't move, still seated, hands folded, eyes locked, face unreadable, not a muscle twitched. Trump jabbed a finger across the table. "You don't get to question me. You don't get to bring up my family, my name, and pretend you're some kind of hero." He jabbed again harder. "This is political theater. And you," he leaned in, "you are not the main act." Denzel waited calm. Still, he let the shouting echo until it collapsed under its own weight. Then slowly, he leaned forward. His voice was a whisper, but the mic caught every word. "The truth won't be muted just because it's inconvenient." It wasn't rage. It was a scalpel, and that made it lethal. Trump's lawyers scrambled, one whispering furiously in his ear, another rifling folders for anything that could be spun into a lifeline. Behind them, producers paced, mouthing frantic commands, but no one cut the feed. CNN stayed live. MSNBC held the shot. Even Fox let it roll, unscripted, unfiltered, undeniable. And in the middle of it all, Denzel Washington stood. Not abruptly, not for performance, but with the certainty of a man who knew the next move was his. He stood like a man who already knew the verdict. "You cradled her once," Denzel said, his tone flat but heavy, then erased her like a typo. "You kissed her forehead. You gave her a plush elephant, then told the nurse, 'Don't bother writing down my name.'" The words didn't need volume. They landed with the weight of a gavel. Now that child has a name. She has a face. She has a voice, and you can't bury that with press releases or pressure. Trump tried to break in. "You're done. This is slander." Denzel's reply was instant, sharp. "No, you're done. This isn't about winning a hearing. It's about whether you are the man you tell this nation you are." The room didn't gasp this time. It tightened. This wasn't shock anymore. It was anticipation. Then from the back of the chamber, the rear door opened. No fanfare, no announcement, just the click of leather saws and the measured stride of a man in a gray suit. Thin frame, older eyes alert, a leather folder tucked under one arm. His expression was serious, almost haunted. Denzel saw him. He didn't flinch, didn't widen his eyes, but his breath caught just enough to shift the rhythm. Because this man hadn't come to defend, he had come to twist the knife. He hadn't even reached his seat before it started. One reporter's phone buzzed, then another, then a wave. Screens lit across the gallery like a chain reaction. Heads bent toward each other, whispers built. Finally, one reporter stood trembling just slightly. Phone raised. "Mr. Chairman, we've just confirmed a leaked message." The room stilled. Even Trump went silent. "It's from the First Lady." A freeze. No one moved. The reporter read slowly, each word cutting closer to detonation. "I told him this would come back." Melania Trump text to aide timestamp 3:42 a.m. The gasps weren't loud. They didn't need to be. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. Inevitability. A quiet confession whispered in the dark. Trump's face seemed to collapse. Color drained. He turned to his staff but found only blank stars, slow shakes of the head. No tweet, no statement, just Melania's silence. Louder than any press conference. Denzel didn't move. Then slowly he reached down and pressed play on a second recording. The sound was older, muffled, but clear enough to hit like a hammer. A man's voice, cold, corporate, emotionless. "Look, Maria, we just want to help you move on. We're prepared to offer $130,000. No admission of anything. You'll sign the NDA. No press, no trouble, no more calls." The room ceased. Denzel turned back to the committee. "That was 2013. The voice belongs to Robert Blaine, former legal consultant for the Trump Organization. Maria kept that voicemail for 11 years. He paused, letting it hang like a blade above the room. She didn't want the money. She wanted her daughter to know where she came from. Trump's hand slammed against the desk. "That call is fake." "That's not a gavel strike, Mr. President," the chairman barked. "You will remain silent unless recognized." Trump sat back, seething. His jaw worked. His eyes darted. Corners, exits, reporters, anywhere but the evidence stacked before him. His legal team huddled close, whispering, their faces drawn tight. It was too late. Outside the chamber, the nation was already on fire. Within minutes, a new hashtag had detonated across social media. Lucia Trump. Side-by-side photos of Donald Trump and the daughter he had never claimed flooded feeds. Networks cut programming. Talk shows went live without scripts. Facebook timelines swelled with reposts of the photograph, the bracelet, the DNA report. Millions watched. Millions reacted. But inside the hearing room, stillness held. Denzel Washington stood at the witness table, unmoving, his voice carried without strain. The world knows now. Every truth, every cover-up, every name that was paid to disappear. He turned slowly, deliberately into the camera lens. Lucia never asked for fame. She never asked for headlines. All she ever wanted, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, was to be seen. Then he stopped, letting silence speak. The world now knew. The question was no longer what it had heard. It was what it would believe. Outside, belief had already tipped. The moment Denzel placed the bracelet on the table and pressed play on that voicemail, the fuse had been lit. By noon, hashtags were everywhere. Lucia Trump, chalks on the Hill. Justice for Lucia. What began as whispers swelled into a digital roar on TikTok. The clip of Denzel turning over the photograph passed 1 million views in under an hour. A slowed piano-backed version of Lucia's voice. "I hope you see me," circulated among activists, teachers, even veterans. One tweet read, "I voted for him twice. I won't do it again." Outside Capitol Hill, the first small circles of protesters grew into thousands. Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, Dallas, Chicago. Handmade signs rose into the air like flags. "She's not invisible. DNA doesn't lie. We believe Lucia." Black advocacy groups called it a modern-day reckoning. Latino organizations named Denzel the voice of every forgotten child. Immigration coalitions issued statements calling the hearing a historic inflection point in America's moral conscience. The streets echoed with chants. Raw, unrehearsed, real. "Say her name, Lucia." The words rolled in English, in Spanish, through megaphones and live streams. The New York Times pushed its breaking headline early. The Capitol DNA Reckoning. CNN called it the moment the myth cracked. Even Fox News hesitated, then aired the bracelet on loop. Uncut. Undeniable. By nightfall, late-night hosts had scrapped their monologues. They quoted Denzel's words like scripture. Pundits argued over whether this was scandal or tragedy, but no one questioned its force. In classrooms, children asked about Lucia. Teachers tried to explain what happens when truth hides in plain sight. In one fourth-grade class, the students wrote letters to a girl they'd never met. They folded them, sealed them, and mailed them to Congress. Every corner of the country felt the weight of it, but nowhere more than in one small house in San Antonio. There Lucia sat curled on a couch, the same plush elephant in her lap that her mother had saved for 11 years. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. She watched Denzel's face on the screen, saw her photograph on the desk, heard the country speak her name. Her fingers traced the letters on the bracelet they'd cut from her wrist. Quiet, careful, as if remembering meant more than surviving. And in that moment, a little girl waited for her name to be spoken without shame. The morning after, Capitol Hill felt different. The marble halls didn't just echo with footsteps. They carried a new kind of pressure, the kind that builds when silence has run out. Inside the Oversight Committee chamber, every seat was filled. Denzel Washington sat in the front row. No folder, no envelope, just his voice. Allies flanked him, posture straight, heads bowed, silence like steel. Across the aisle, the opposition wore the same tailored suits, but they looked smaller now. The chairman's gave,